All right, now I'd like to talk a little bit about the Writing Wizards program. So in Writing Wizards, students write fiction stories and they go through like what we call a publishing process. So they're going to do the cover and the illustrations and the about the author page and the dedication page so that they have a full story to take home at the end. Students can either work alone or in pairs for this class. I always feel like it's more fun if they work in pairs, but writing a story is a little harder to do in pairs than in some of our other classes where they're building skyscrapers or inventing businesses or what have you. So if students want to work alone, that's totally fine. We've also had times where students start out together and they try to think of a story together, and then at some point there's kind of like just some differences in what direction to go with in their story, and they decide to split and work separately. That's totally fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. So you can facilitate that if that's what they decide. For groups that do work in pairs, what we do is at the end of the class, instead of taking their story home like the students who are working by themselves do, you take the story with you, and then if you can scan the story and send it to me as a PDF, I'll send it along to their families. If you don't have a scanner or can't make that happen, then let's talk. You could potentially mail me the story and I'll scan it, or we'll figure something out. We talked early on in this class about how J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter stories, spent 7 years planning out their story. We kind of joke with them that we're not going to take 7 years to plan, but we are going to take a lot of the first class just to plan out our stories. So the students do some artwork at the beginning where they kind of imagine a story world, and then they add in their protagonist. For our 9-hour classes and our 8-hour classes, we take a little less time with this, but for our 12-hour classes, we take a little bit more time to do the artwork and the planning. For students who don't love the writing process, this is also like a nice way to kind of ease them into the class. The first class, they do a little bit of writing in an activity that we do, but for the most part, they're doing a lot of artwork in that first class, and it just makes it a little bit easier. One of the more challenging parts of the class, I feel like, is this 8-box planner that you see here in which they plan out their stories. In the video, we talk with them a lot about how to do this, but I would say for the teacher, the main role is that you want to look over these really carefully when they give them to you. Sometimes in the planner, in these boxes, they'll write things that just aren't very significant. So they'll write something like the characters went for a walk or something like that, or the character took a bath or something like that. Which isn't like a big part of their story. So you want to check these over carefully and send them back if the students aren't writing like big major events of their story. They don't need to write a lot in the boxes, but the story needs to have a good plan. And what we found is if they do this planner sheet well, the stories come out really well. Throughout the class, we do 4 or 5 different lessons, and then each lesson has either a game or an activity that's associated with it. Let me tell you about each of the lessons real quick. So one is a lesson on synonyms and gem words, so really good words. So like instead of using the word small, using the word minute or something like that. We call those in this class red pen words, which is really just a device to get them to make changes with a red pen and write in the new word. Another concept is called stretch out the good part. So here what we found is students sometimes will just kind of like skip through major parts of their story and just write like a sentence or two, and then they're on to the next thing. This is an attempt to get the kids to slow down and write like a half page or a full page just on that one part of their story. The good parts are generally the parts that are in that 8-box planner. Those are the ones that they really want to plan out and stretch out. We also practice how to take really general sentences and make them more specific. This is a skill that can really help students with their writing. So if it said like the guy walked down the street to his car, you could change that to like Joe Simpson walked down Belmont Street to his Toyota Corolla or something like that. I think that's the example that we use in the class. So they play a little game where they practice that skill. Another skill that they practice is using dialogue in their story. If there's one thing that really improves students' stories at this age, it's adding dialogue. It just really makes them come alive. So they do an activity where they're going to practice adding dialogue into like a story that we give them. And the last concept, which actually we do first, I believe, is called mind pictures. So a mind picture is like when you describe something so well that somebody can picture it in your mind. For that activity, we kind of motivate them early in the class to earn points by writing a really good mind picture. And we give them a little part of a story, and then they need to describe the thing that we ask them to describe really well. Towards the end of the class, once we've introduced the 5 or 6 different strategies and lessons, we do a couple of wrap-up activities. One is I read a book to them called Eli by Bill Peet. And then they kind of analyze what the author, Bill Peet, is doing in the story, like if he's using a good mind picture or a good red pen word, or if he's stretched out a part, like that. So it's mainly me reading the story to them and then doing a number of turn and talks. And we do it over 2 classes, so they're not sitting for too long. It shouldn't be particularly difficult. We put up the illustrations of the story on the green screen so they can see those, but there are 5 or 6 different turn and talks in that portion. One of the key things to think about as a teacher for this class is timing. You obviously want to have kids be able to take home a completed story. So we talk with them a lot in the final class or 2 about getting to a point where they can finish their story and illustrate it and do the cover and about the author sheet and all that kind of stuff. But you want to really like help push them along so that they're in a position to finish. As we say in the video, if worse comes to worse, they can definitely make it like a part 1 of their story, and then at some future date they would potentially do a part 2. So if kids go into the final class and they're like only on box 4 of their 8 boxes, then that's probably what you're going to aim to do, is to have them kind of chop it off. So we set up that final class so that when you get to the point where it's like 40 minutes left in class, we stop the writing portion. We have everybody move to the illustrations and the cover and all that, so that everybody has a chance to finish that. On the other end, you might get some very fast writers, and in that case you want to push them to add a little bit more, to stretch out some parts, to add some dialogue. That may feel like a little annoying to kids as you constantly send them back to make improvements, but I tried to like sort of prep that on the video that will happen. And there'll be a lot for them to do towards the end, like edit their story and add illustrations and so forth. Just on that topic, because of the timing of the class, we really don't have time to do first drafts and second drafts, which they may be used to from school. I really wish we did have time, but we have so much content to cover, and we felt like it was more important to cover the content than to do drafts. So that means once they start writing their story, that is the final draft. So you do want to like make sure that the penmanship is like reasonable, like readable. It doesn't have to be beautiful, but just because that will be the final draft. Also, when they do go to edit their stories, they can write things in like the lines in between and make some edits like that, and that's fine. In fact, even though it's a final draft, like the parents will see that they've really spent some time editing the story, which is nice. So that's pretty much it. There's a lot of content in this class, and it's definitely a more academic class than some of our programs, so they're going to be working hard. So I definitely reinforce with points quite a bit. So good luck with the class.